I'm Iranian, and here's everything you need to know in less than 20 minutes about what's currently happening in occupied Iran with the nationwide strikes and protests by Iranians against the Islamic Republic that the mainstream media won't tell you. If you've been watching Iran this week, you already know that something huge is happening. It started on Sunday, December 28, with protests regarding the collapsing economy and the financial crisis, which quickly sparked into anti-Islam, anti-Islamic Republic, pro-revolution, and pro-Shah demonstrations that have rapidly taken over the country. Over the last 6 days, we have seen nationwide strikes by merchants, university students joining in, violent security crackdowns by the Islamic regime terrorist forces, reported deaths, Islamic regime officials attacking Iranians attending funerals, and mounting international attention, especially after President Trump gave an explicit warning to the Islamic Republic that the United States would intervene if the Islamic Republic does not stop murdering innocent Iranians. Events are still rapidly unfolding. But right now, I'm going to walk you through exactly what happened day by day in the first 6 days, starting from December 28 until January 2nd. I'm also going to give you the important context from the Iranian perspective that you're not going to get from mainstream media or non Iranian commentators. The immediate backdrop is the Islamic Republic of Iran's economic downfall. Inflation has skyrocketed to over 40%, and the rial, which is the official currency of the country, has collapsed to a historic low of 1.4 million rials to $1. Keep in mind, in 1979, when the Shah of Iran was still in power and before the Islamic dictatorship occupied Iran, the value of the rial was 70 to $1. So just put that into perspective. In 1979, 46 years ago, the value of the rial was 70 rials to $1. Today, it has dropped to a historic low of 1.4 million rials to the US dollar. On Sunday, December 28, because of the collapse of the rial, protests and strikes began to break out across central Tehran and various shops across the city. Shopkeepers shut down their stores in protest of the economic instability and financial collapse of the rial. Videos circulating from Tehran, the capital city of Iran, showed that these chants and strikes are growing. This first day was very significant for us Iranians because it didn't look like scattered anger. It looked like the start of coordinated market pressure. Massive store closures across the city, rapidly increasing crowds, and within hours of the first strike, we started hearing slogans and chants not about the economic crisis, but about who is responsible for the economic crisis and what shopkeepers want. In other words, the demonstrations quickly shifted from complaining about the economic collapse to calling for overthrow of the Islamic Republic, calling for revolution, and calling for the return of the Shah of Iran, His Royal Highness Mirza Pahlavi II, who's currently in exile. At the same time, the Shah of Iran in exile, His Royal Highness King Mirza Pahlavi II, put out a video message to Iranians in occupied Iran, encouraging them to continue the strikes, encouraging them to continue putting pressure on the Islamic Republic in order to overthrow them, and encouraging all Iranians to join in the peaceful demonstrations. On the second day, Monday, December 29, the protests grew, not only in Tehran, but in cities across the country of Iran, including Mashhad and Isfahan. And while the mainstream media was still calling this an economic protest, Iranians actually know the truth. In less than 24 hours, Iranians were out in the streets gathering en masse, calling for revolution, calling for the end of the Islamic Republic, and they were also saying Javid Shah, which means long live the king. In other words, Iranians are calling for the Shah of Iran to return and lead Iran into a transition from the Islamic Republic into a functioning secular democratic system. Because what the mainstream media refuses to tell you is that if these demonstrations and protests were actually about the economic situation, why would Iranians be going out in the streets and yelling, "Long live the king"? Why would they be going out in the streets and saying, "In akharin nabarde Pahlavi barmigarde," which means this is the final battle, Pahlavi will return? In less than 24 hours, the story was no longer about a few shops closed. The story has now become that we are witnessing the biggest pro-revolution anti-Islamic Republic demonstrations that we have seen in Iran in recent years. But what's even more important about these pro-revolution demonstrations is that Iranians are not only calling for the end of the Islamic Republic, they are also calling for the return of the King of Iran who is in exile, His Royal Highness Reza Pahlavi II. On Tuesday, December 30th, the third day of strikes, we see a major escalation. The strikes have now spread to university campuses. And while Reuters and mainstream media still claimed that university students are joining in because of the economic collapse, the truth is actually much different. Because if the situation really was about the economy, why would the university students also be chanting, "Down with the dictator, long live the king, and this is the final battle, Pahlavi will return"? University students are often the engine of sustained protest movements. And so the fact that university students, not just in Tehran, but across various cities in occupied Iran, are now getting involved in the anti-Islam, pro-Shah, pro-revolution demonstrations, that's a pretty big deal. And of course, at the same time, given that the Islamic Republic is a brutal totalitarian dictatorship, it also began violently cracking down on protesters. And keep in mind, the protesters had been pretty much peaceful up until that point. By day 3, the rest of the world was starting to catch on to what we Iranians had noticed right away on day 1, that these protests were no longer about the economy, and they were about politics. They were about overthrowing the terrorist Islamic Republic. They were about getting rid of Sharia law. They were about getting rid of Islam, and they are also about bringing the Shah of Iran back to Iran. By day 4, Wednesday, December 31, the demonstrations were in full swing. Over 50 cities in occupied Iran have now risen up and are participating in the nationwide demonstrations and protests against the Islamic Republic. Massive crowds are coming out, and the terrorist Islamic Republic is, of course, responding with violence, shooting directly into innocent, unarmed crowds of Iranians. His Royal Highness, King Reza Pahlavi II, also issued a New Year's Eve statement. My courageous compatriots, your presence in the streets across Iran has kindled the flame of a national revolution. The continuation and expansion of your presence and taking control of the streets is today our foremost vital priority. I call upon the people of Iran to join in with the nationwide strikes and protests. Government employees, workers in the energy and transportation sectors, truck drivers, nurses, teachers, and academics, artisans and entrepreneurs, retirees, and those who have lost their savings. Everyone unite and join this national movement. Iran and its streets belong to the Iranian nation, and we will be victorious because we are united and we are many. Long live Iran, Reza Pahlavi. By day 5, we started hearing the terrible news of multiple deaths of innocent Iranians at the hands of the Islamic Republic. Something that you won't hear about in the mainstream media is that there is something different about the current demonstrations. In previous demonstrations, usually by day 3, the Islamic Republic has already brought out its anti-riot security forces in full force. We're talking about hundreds, if not thousands, of armed anti-riot police spread across the country going after innocent, unarmed Iranian protesters. And so by day 3, we Iranians were already waiting for the horrible news of massive crackdowns, internet being shutting down, mass murders, things that have happened in the past. And yet it's already day 5, and we have not seen any of that yet. And while I do want to point out that even a single casualty at the hands of the terrorist Islamic dictatorship is a tragedy to us Iranians, the fact that right now we are able to count the number of casualties on both hands, that's never happened before. Usually by this time, our casualty numbers are in the hundreds, sometimes the thousands. Instead, what we are seeing are smaller numbers of the Basij military forces, the Islamic regime anti-riot police, small numbers of them. We're not seeing the massive turnout anymore. And what we are instead seeing are Iranians fighting back. They're fighting back, they're attacking, they're taking over IRGC police bases, they're burning Islamic regime cars. They are fighting back. Iranians are quickly finding out that the Islamic Republic is not as strong as it used to be. And a big reason for that is the 12-day conflict between Israel and the Islamic Republic back in the summer, where Israel significantly weakened the proxy forces of the terrorist Islamic Republic, significantly weakened the Islamic Republic's IRGC bases, and significantly weakened the Islamic regime in and of itself. And so for the first time in 47 years since the terrorist Islamic Republic took Iran hostage, Iranians finally have a fighting chance because the Islamic Republic, thanks to Israel, has never been weaker. By Friday, January 2nd, which is the 6th day of the protests, we're not seeing any signs of Iranians slowing down. In fact, things are ramping up. More and more cities across the country are getting involved. Crowds are getting bigger. We're now seeing footage of Islamic regime officials running away. Islamic centers are being burned down. Statues and effigies related to the Islamic Republic are being torn down and burned. Iranians are continuing to yell death to the dictator, Javid Shah. Javid Shah means long live the king. And they're yelling in akharin nabarde Pahlavi barmigarde, which means this is the final battle, Pahlavi will return. Unfortunately, the violence isn't stopping either. The terrorist Islamic Republic is continuing to shoot at Iranians, including those who are attending the funerals of innocent Iranians who were murdered just a few days ago because they were protesting. But again, what's really interesting about this is that instead of Iranians running away, they are fighting back. But now here's where it gets very interesting. Seemingly out of nowhere, President Trump, the President of the United States of America, put out a stark warning to the terrorist Islamic Republic. President Trump posted on social media that if Iran shoots and violently kills peaceful protesters, which is their custom, the United States of America will come to their rescue. We are locked and loaded and ready to go. Thank you for your attention to this matter, President Donald J. Trump. Guys, this is a huge policy shift for the United States. Back in 2009, when President Obama was still in power, when the Iranian people were fighting to overthrow the regime, Obama, instead of choosing to stand with the Iranian people, he chose to support the Islamic Republic and threw them a lifeline. And because of President Obama's decision to support the terrorist Islamic Republic back in 2009, many Iranians consider Obama's hands to be covered with the blood of the Iranian people because he had a chance to help Iranians overthrow the regime, and he chose to side with the Islamic terrorists. And so this message by President Trump has pretty much gone viral among Iranians, and Iranians are incredibly excited about this. But I want to make one thing very clear. This is not a call for World War III. This is not a call for boots on the ground. In fact, Iranians don't even want boots on the ground. But if there is some way that President Trump can help Iranians by weakening the Islamic Republic, that's making Iranians very, very excited. And President Trump's message has not only circulated widely among Iranians in occupied Iran, but they are now using his message to become even more motivated and even more emboldened to go out on the streets and finish the job. In essence, President Trump just gave the green light to Iranians to go ahead and overthrow the Islamic Republic that has been occupying Iran for the last 47 years, and President Trump stands behind them. I also want to quickly mention Israel and how supportive Israel has also been of the Iranian people in their fight to overthrow the Islamic Republic. And just a few days ago on Monday, when Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Trump were meeting in Washington, President Trump pretty much confirmed that he's given the green light to Netanyahu to do whatever he needs to do in the Middle East. And that includes going after the terrorist Islamic Republic if Israel feels the need to do so. And so now the terrorist Islamic Republic is in a huge predicament because not only do they know that Israel is monitoring them, but the United States of America is also monitoring them. And of course, the Islamic Republic, being the uneducated, inbred Islamic jihadi savages that they are, have responded by threatening the safety of American soldiers. Now, I don't know about you, but I don't think President Trump's going to take very kindly to the fact that a bunch of Islamic savages in the Middle East are threatening Americans. I have a feeling he's not going to take that lightly, and I have a feeling he's not going to ignore that either. The Shah of Iran, His Royal Highness King Reza Pahlavi, who's currently in exile and is the leader of the Iranian official opposition, has also now just responded to President Trump's message. President Trump, thank you for your strong leadership and support of my compatriots. This warning you have issued to the criminal leaders of the Islamic Republic gives my people greater strength and hope. Hope that, at last, a president of the United States is standing firmly by their side. As they risk their lives to end this regime's 46-year reign of chaos and terror, they send me with a responsibility and a message to seek the relationship Iran once had with America that brought peace and prosperity to the Middle East. I have the plan for stable transition for Iran and the support of my people to get it done. With your leadership of the free world, we can leave a legacy of lasting peace. The situation in occupied Iran is escalating quickly, and we are constantly getting more and more videos coming out by the second. What's also really interesting is that usually the Islamic Republic would have shut down the internet by now, and yet for some reason, Iranians are still able to communicate with the outside world. For example, back in November of 2019, the Islamic Republic shut down the internet for 1 week, and they murdered over 5,000 innocent Iranians in what we call Bloody November. And yet this time around, they haven't been able to do so. Iranians are still getting internet access, which makes me think that there might be someone or someones who are inside occupied Iran quietly helping Iranians behind the scenes by making sure that they have stable, reliable internet connections so that Iranians can continue sharing with the world exactly what is going on in occupied Iran.